Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Episode 39 of Weather Weekly. Good to have you along here as we are rolling along for the month of November. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey with Wish TV in Indianapolis. Good to be with you as we are now kind of gearing up toward the chilly days of the end of fall and kind of through the back half of the fall season and gearing up for winter, which is what's going to be the focus for this week's podcast. It is Winter Weather Preparedness Week here in central Indiana. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Quick headlines here today. Not a lot going on. It's been very quiet. Locally. In fact, we've been very mild. Coming off kind of the chill. We had our first freeze of the season in Indianapolis last week. Had several mornings where we did below freezing, so essentially that puts an end to the growing season. It was interesting, though. Never had a freeze watch or a warning or any frost advisories out because we didn't get those in October. And so the Weather Service doesn't typically issue those kind of things when you get to the month of November because it's expected, right? You typically get those kind of freezing temperatures in the month of November. In fact, our average low for this week is around 35, 36 degrees, which would typically, and we talked about this several podcasts ago, but that would be cold enough to likely get at least some patchy frost around the area. So not an unusual thing for us to actually pick up on that. Otherwise, it's been very quiet, not much rain over the last several days here, which is not a bad thing. Allowed the farmers to get out and kind of conclude harvest season. I know a lot of the farmers were out and about getting the job done here. We've had a nice stretch of days to be able to do that. This week also looks pretty good as well, which we'll talk about in the forecast at the end of this podcast. Nationally speaking, really the only thing to look ahead to, and I'm not going to get specific on local. We'll do that at the end of the podcast we typically do with our forecast. But the one thing that we're going to be watching for, kind of our first winter type system of the season heading our way late week, specifically Wednesday and Thursday. Big area of low pressure kind of digging into the plain states out ahead of it, very mild, which we will see here in the Midwest, but not just here. Really, the whole eastern half of the country is going to be unusually warm for the second week of November. Lots of 60s and 70s across the Midwest and the Northeast. But on the back end of this system, it is much colder, and they're probably going to be seeing their first significant snowfall in parts of the Dakotas and toward northern Minnesota. A little bit of a wintry mix in maybe Minneapolis and Green Bay. And on the front end of that, it's going to be rain and potentially some severe weather from Dallas down to Houston, Kansas City, Memphis. Could have some gusty storms coming in Wednesday night into Thursday. So that one's going to be worth watching in the Mississippi Valley where they could have some severe weather. This is kind of their severe weather season. Down toward the deep south. Certainly not as much as what you would expect, say, in the early spring in places like Alabama and Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, those kind of places, even in around the Oklahoma area. But they do have a ramp up, if you look at a curve here, where we see significant jump in tornadoes and severe weather in the spring, and then you see a decent jump again in the fall. Not as high as the spring, but certainly noteworthy. And so this is not unusual. In fact, we're not immune to that here, and we've talked about some of the massive tornado outbreaks that we've had here in central Indiana during the month of November. As of most recently, 2012 was the big one here, November 17th. So we've had our fair share here in central Indiana. So something to watch for here as we get later on into the week. Tropics-wise, we're kind of nearing the end of the hurricane season. We did have Wanda out in the Atlantic. That has now kind of fallen apart. There is a little disturbance off the coast of the Carolinas that has a very minimal chance of getting any cyclone development over the next 48 hours. So not a major concern there. In the eastern Pacific, we do have two named storms off the coast southwest of Mexico, Sandra and Terry. Sandra is a tropical storm, and Terry is a tropical depression. Both of those don't look to intensify and will be heading west, which means they will be going out to sea and making no impact on landfall. Central Pacific out toward Hawaii, there is nothing, and looks like it's going to stay pretty quiet here over the next 48 plus hours. So good news out there, quiet weather. So again, really the main story is going to be the potential for severe weather and wintry weather with our first kind of major winter system that's going to be moving through the lower 48 states later on this week, which leads us to the main part of our podcast, and that is getting yourself prepared for winter weather. This is not going to be the forecast. We're going to be hopefully talking with Mike Ryan. He actually did go through his official winter forecast this morning in a seminar. I was able to jump on a little bit here, but I'm going to let him, hopefully here in a future podcast in the next week or two, talk about that forecast coming up. And what we potentially could expect here across central Indiana in terms of the winter season. But it is Winter Weather Preparedness Week here in central Indiana. So we're going to talk about everything winter weather that's coming up next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
You buy a pair of socks, that's 2 socks. You buy a pair of Bombas socks, that's 4 socks. Because one purchased is one donated. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. So when you buy a pair of super comfortable Bombas socks, you're also donating a pair. Bombas customers have powered over 150 million donations. So Bombas would like to thank you 150 million times. But we only have like 30 seconds. Go to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO at checkout.
Episode 39 here on Weather Weekly. Good to have you along. In this week's episode, we are going to talk about winter weather, and the timing is good as this drops on a Wednesday. We'll be right in the middle of, for central Indiana, and really for the entire state because the governor declared it this. It is Winter Weather Preparedness Week, and it falls at a good time because this is typically when we kind of start ramping up the winter season. And I know it, sometimes can seem a little bit monotonous that we hammer this home each and every year. We do the same thing with severe weather, right? We have a severe weather preparedness week, and we hammer home about having a severe weather safety plan and having a preparedness kit and all that other stuff. And you'll kind of hear the same things along the lines here of winter weather. But I think it's a good reminder. And look, our job here, yes, we do like to forecast the weather. That's 90% of our job. But a lot of us all got into this because we want to try to convey or message to the public when things get a little bit stressful, whether that be severe weather, tornado warnings, obviously we take very seriously, but I'd say we have more opportunity, especially here in central Indiana, and being a Midwest meteorologist my entire life, that I can count on one hand, the amount of times I've had to break in for very, very long, extensive coverage when it comes to severe weather. Obviously we've broken in and that kind of stuff. And Facebook's changed the game a little bit in terms of being able to broadcast live and, not having to interrupt programming and all that other stuff. That's another conversation. But in terms of significant severe weather outbreaks. In 15 years that I've been doing this, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times where, I've gone on extended periods of time. And I'm saying, over an hour or so, fully. However, I could probably count on two hands or more the amount of times that we've had to forecast for significant winter weather. Winter weather is a whole different animal. And a big reason for that, and I'll kind of dive into it, but it's not always just the amount of snow or the amount of ice that we're going to get. But you have to factor in a lot of other things, the day of the week, the timing of that. Are there going to be people on the roads? That kind of thing. You don't necessarily think about that when you're doing severe weather, when they're issuing watches and warnings, and when you're doing a forecast. I would lean to say the bigger concern that we have in severe weather is severe weather outbreaks that happen overnight because people are sleeping. They're not paying attention. They're not alert, right? Winter weather is a different animal. You'd much rather have people be asleep and off the roads. The worst case scenario is when you have a winter weather system that comes in the heart of the morning or the evening rush, because that can create some enormous problems, right? So they're kind of two different animals here. But the Weather Service is just kind of going through this entire week of just breaking things down on a daily basis. Sunday was just kind of an overview. Monday, they talked about the winter outlook, typical winter weather and threats. We kind of touched on already the snow, the ice, the cold. You've got a multi-facet of winter weather things that you should be concerned with. Tuesday was spent on winter weather travel safety. Obviously, that is one of the biggest things that we always try to drive home because, travel is just made so difficult by winter weather. And then you run into the problem if you get stranded and it's bitter cold outside. What do you do? Wednesday's safety consideration for schools. Thursday's having a winter safety plan. I know we talk a lot about severe weather plans, but do you have a winter safety plan? Friday is outdoor safety during the winter season, and then Saturday they completely summarize the entire week. So they're going to be doing all of that. And if you want to kind of get more in detail, because I'm obviously not going to go and run through day by day what they're talking about and stuff, they have a lot of great information. If you go to weather.gov/IND, very top of the page, it says 2021 winter weather or winter weather preparedness 2021. You can click on that and you can see the entire page, the entire overview. And it's going to be a lot of the points that I'm hitting up on here in this podcast here for today. It'll have links from the American Red Cross, what they suggest for your disaster preparedness kits, both for severe weather and winter weather. And I think it's important that even though we are focusing on winter weather, we just mentioned that you can have severe weather at any point, any day of the week, any week of a month, and any month of the year. You can have severe weather here in central Indiana. So something to always keep in mind, even though we're kind of heavy on the winter weather aspect here. What I did want to kind of go through, though, just a couple of quick notes here, because a lot of you that listen to this are already pretty weather savvy. I know not everybody is, but most of you are kind of weather nerds like me, so you know a lot of this stuff. But I think it's a good reminder, too, as we kind of refresh ourselves. We've been out of it for a little while in terms of significant winter weather. So it's good to kind of refresh our brains a little bit. It's also important to note, because the biggest question that I always get around as early as September, but certainly in October and definitely this time of year is, how bad is this winter going to be? And we're going to hit up on this in a future podcast with Mike Ryan like we did last year, and he's going to come out with his official forecast. And I'm going to bring it up in the at the end of this podcast when we're looking ahead. But being a La Nina year, you have the potential of having a more active weather pattern. Doesn't necessarily mean it means more snow. It just means that we could see more precipitation. Maybe it's in the form of liquid. But you definitely have those opportunities that you're going to have maybe more robust systems coming in here. So if you get the timing right, you could see a little bit more snow. And I think it's always important to note that, look, guys, this is central Indiana, or Indiana in general, or the Midwest, depending on where you're listening. And we get snow. It's going to happen. We will have a snow. Will it be a big snow? Who knows? We had our big one last year, right? But there will be problematic snows. I think it's also important to note, too, that, not every snow system is created equal. I think an 8-inch snow overnight, Friday night into Saturday morning is less impactful than a 2-inch snow on a Wednesday at 5 p.m. Would you agree? And a lot of that has to do with timing. And that's where I think it's nice that the Weather Service has evolved over the years. With it being a science, sometimes you always felt that you needed to have a hard line of, you had to meet certain criteria to put out some sort of winter weather product. And indeed, there are certain products that have to meet certain criteria. But there's other products, too, that can definitely be judgment-based on situations. So it's situational kind of alerting. And that is based on the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service. So that's a little bit different than severe weather, right? And I'll kind of compare and contrast a little bit. But I want to run through some of the products, the main products that we have here in central Indiana. And I think it's important to note, now most of the Indiana or surrounding offices kind of go on the same guidelines, but not all of these match up to other guidelines in other offices, say like in Nashville, Tennessee. Their winter storm warning criteria is going to be much different than in Indianapolis because they don't anticipate snow. In Atlanta, Georgia, their winter storm warning is going to be far, far different than what we have here in central Indiana because they don't have the infrastructure to be able to handle a lot of snow. They just don't get it, right? We've seen national news stories over the years when they get an inch of snow and it's almost crippling. Where we get an inch of snow, we just kind of plow through it, right? So this is specifically for Indiana, okay? Obviously the big one, blizzard warning. And I think a lot of people get confused. And Stephen and I talked a lot about this when we did the anniversary episode of the blizzard of 1978 because it never fails. Now, it's been a while since we've actually had a blizzard warning here in the central Indiana area. But any time that we post that on social media, whether it's been here, whether it's when I lived back in Peoria, I always had the same comment. That's nothing compared to the blizzard of 78. That was a blizzard. That was a massive storm. No doubt about that. That was a blizzard. But, there is certain thresholds that need to be met to declare a storm a blizzard. And it's not, what was the strongest blizzard, which for many was the blizzard of 1978. So here's some of the things, if you didn't know, what classifies a winter storm as a blizzard and what would then create a blizzard warning. You need a few things. You need sustained winds or frequent gusts of 35 miles per hour or more for at least 3 hours and considerable falling and or blowing snow, reducing visibility frequently to less than a quarter of a mile. I think the important thing here is, and this is where we lose some people, there have been times, I think there's probably been 1 or 2 times, I don't think it was here in Indianapolis, but in my time in Peoria, that we had a couple of blizzard warnings where we had very minimal falling snow, but we had several inches of very light, powdery, dry snow on the ground, which means it was super easy for it to whip up, okay? And we had a little area of low pressure that kind of was wound up, rolled right over the state, and was going to give us about 6 hours plus worth of 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts. the Weather Service in Lincoln, Illinois, issued a blizzard warning. And I spent a vast majority of my day when that got issued. And you have to keep in mind, at that time, blizzard warnings were alerted on weather radios. It was also pushed out on your WIA, which we talked about that. That's the alert that you get on your phone, right? You get them sometimes for the Amber alerts, but you can also get them from severe weather. So it's based off of GPS, what your location is. And people were just saying, well, you said we're only going to get like an inch of snow out of this. How is it a blizzard warning if we're only going to get an inch of snow? And that's it. And I think that's where we lose people a little bit, because I think when we think of blizzard, we think of epic amounts of snow accumulation, right? And then crazy snow drifts. Those are the two main factors. I think people really go heavy on the snowfall accumulation. That's not the case. Those two instances that I think of, we had less than an inch of accumulation, but we had crazy blowing and drifting of snow because we had 40 to 50 plus mile per hour wind gusts that had definitely qualified as a blizzard warning, because they had to shut down some of the interstates because of the visibility being so bad, because of some of the interstates being drifted over because of some of these high winds. Okay, so that's the important thing right there. And I think there's a lot of confusion whenever we get a blizzard warning issued. It does not always mean an epic amount of snow. It does not, right? It means more so winds and visibility. Okay, never has anything to do with accumulating snow. In fact, there's no wording. You didn't see me say anything about how much snow you have to hit to be able to hit that threshold for a blizzard warning. It's all about wind and visibility. Now, with that said, winter storm warnings are a different story. Okay? Winter storm warnings in Indiana, and again, as I mentioned previously, this could be totally different in Atlanta or in Birmingham or in Nashville, Tennessee, in the Carolinas. It could also be different in places like Syracuse, New York, that are used to epic amounts of snow, right? So numbers vary depending on the office, depending on what is considered kind of a crippling storm for you. In Indiana, winter storm warning is 6 inches or more of snow, or a combination of winter weather types with major impacts. I think that's important also, and that's where we can lose some people as well, because it could be a mixture of a little bit of snow, a little bit of ice, right? It could be a mixture of some snow, and then you're going to have some really nasty temperatures after to follow. You could have a lot of different variables in that, okay? Ice storm warning means a 1/4 of an inch or more of ice accumulation, okay? So you have to hit a certain threshold to hit ice storm warning. I think it's also important to note, and this is going to carry over into the next thing I'm going to talk about, that now this, I believe, was new either last year or the year before. I believe it was last year. So the winter of 2020, 2019, 2020, 2020 to 2021 was the first year for this, that they eliminated the freezing rain advisory. So they had actually kind of a step down from the ice storm warning. They've now eliminated that, okay? So that's an ice storm warning. Have to hit a 1/4 of an inch or more of ice accumulation. Now, here's the kind of confusing one. Winter weather advisory. This is kind of a hodgepodge of just a little bit of everything. It could be one thing or the other, or all of them. Okay? Winter weather advisory is less than 6 inches of snow, because we already mentioned that the winter storm warning is for 6 inches of snow or more. So less than 6 inches will get you in a winter weather advisory. Less than a 1/4 of an inch of ice accumulation and freezing rain. Visibility is reduced in blowing snow with winds less than 35 miles per hour, or a combination of all of the above. So again, with the winter weather advisory, where you get a little bit of confusion, because I think people are so set in thinking you get a winter weather advisory or a blizzard warning. Not so much the winter storm warning, because that is specifically for snowfall accumulation. But blizzard warning and winter weather advisories does not necessarily mean that we're going to get accumulating snow. I think it's also important to note, and they don't have this written down because you could then veer off in just a million different directions. But winter weather advisories, let's say we're going to get an inch of snowfall. Okay, let's just do an example here. That we get 1 inch of snowfall. I'm going to kind of compare and contrast. So 1 inch of snowfall in the middle of January where we've already had several snowfalls. Compared to, for example, this is not my forecast, so don't write this down. But let's say this coming Sunday, we're planning to get 1 inch of snowfall Sunday night and a Monday. Same kind of system, but there may be a better opportunity that the Weather Service is going to issue a winter weather advisory for the Sunday system. Again, fake, not real, but let's say we are going to have one here this coming Sunday, as opposed to the same kind of system that's going to dump a inch of snowfall in the middle of January when we've already had several rounds of snow and we're kind of used to it. This is where the Weather Service can kind of exercise their judgment here, okay, based on several factors. And that could be it being the first snow of the season. Even if it doesn't seem like it's a big one, it could be a half an inch or an inch of snow. Certainly that's not one that everybody's going to say, whoa, that was a big one. But because it's the first snow of the season, the Weather Service may see fit to issue a winter weather advisory to just heighten awareness because it is the first snow of the season. I've seen it. You've seen it. The first snow always seems to cause problems. Doesn't matter what time it hits. We always see an increase in accident activity because people just forget how to drive. They forget to slow down. They don't give themselves enough space, that kind of stuff. So the Weather Service may see fit to issue an advisory because of that. In the same sense, let's say we've got a 1 inch snowfall maker that's going to happen Saturday night into Sunday while everybody's sleeping, compared to a Monday late afternoon, only 1 inch. But that Monday afternoon may get a winter weather advisory while the Saturday night system may not. The reason is impact based because you will be having school buses on the road kind of concluding their routes. You're going to have people leaving work. So you're going to have a higher volume of vehicle traffic, which also in turn means that you're not going to have the opportunity for truck drivers to treat the road, to get the snow cleared off the road because there's going to be so many vehicles on the road and people trying to rush home, right? So again, winter weather advisories, while there is a certain criteria that needs to be met, it's vague. Less than 6 inches of snow. You notice that it doesn't say between 2 to 6 inches of snow. It's just less than what a winter storm warning would get, because a lot of that can be, again, impact driven. Think about the winter weather advisory for less than 1/4 inch of ice. Again, maybe a glaze, although we know that just a little bit of ice can go a long way in creating some problems. But say you're going to get maybe like 1/10 inch of ice. But let's say you've got some moderately strong winds that could lead to power outages. That may trigger a winter weather advisory. Okay, does that make sense to you? So there's a lot of ways that you can go with the winter weather advisory. And they kind of, when they got rid of the freezing rain advisory and some of these other advisories and they combined all of them, it did make it kind of a hodgepodge or a free-for-all with that winter weather advisory. So it's our job in the media and anybody really within the weather enterprise to kind of drive that home that, hey, just because there's a winter weather advisory doesn't mean we're going to get a bunch of snow. I think that's where everybody's brain immediately goes to. And I try to drive that home in my forecasts, and hopefully those of you that have followed me along long enough know that I want to get the forecast right when it comes to snowfall accumulation. That's a challenge. I love that challenge, but I think more important than that is the impacts. What kind of impacts is that particular system going to present to you? 4 to 6 inches of snow, you're really not going to know a whole lot of difference there. Okay. Obviously, if you go from 4 to 8 or 10, you are. But, 4 to 6 inches of snow is a considerable amount. Either way you spin it. But 4 to 6 inches of snow is more manageable on a weekend overnight than it is during the morning drive or the evening drive or at any point during the day during the work week, right? So it is very much impact based and impact driven. And I think that's where we're really trying to get to. Everybody wants to see that snowfall accumulation map. Everybody wants to see that. But I think it's our job to try to shift that mentality to try to get people to think more impact-based. How is this going to impact me when I'm getting the kids ready for school? Will they have a delay? Is there a potential for that? How much earlier am I going to need to leave for work? Is it going to be worse if I travel south, north, east, west, that kind of thing? So those are all kind of things that we try to think about when we're conveying our forecasts. Obviously, you have wind chill warnings, wind chill advisories. We get a few of those a year. Wind chill warning means the threshold there is 25 degrees below. That's wind chills or colder. Wind chill advisory is 15 degrees below to 24 degrees below zero. And again, those are just wind chills, not air temperatures. I think the other one, and this is a newer product over the last couple of years, and we haven't had a whole bunch of these, but these are kind of treated similar to, say, a severe thunderstorm warning or a tornado warning. It's called a snow squall warning. They actually will follow a polygon base. And what I mean by that is winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, blizzard warnings, they're all county-based, right? When we show you a map, we show you the counties that are filled in with those advisories or the warnings. Snow squall warnings are very much like severe thunderstorm warnings in the sense that it could be a portion of a county. It could be a portion of Marion County. It could be a portion of Delaware County or Monroe County or Brown County. And what it is, basically, it's these short, intense periods of moderate to heavy snowfall producing severely restricted visibility at a quarter mile or less, and slick roads due to sub-freezing road temperatures or quickly falling temperatures likely to produce flash freeze conditions. And we've seen these, we get these a lot in kind of the wake of storm systems coming through. We'll often see these, especially in northwestern Indiana and western Indiana coming off Lake Michigan. There'll be these little lake effect enhanced snow squalls where you could get a very quick accumulating snow of maybe an inch or two. They usually don't amount to much because they don't hang around one spot very long, but they could be around for a good 15 to 20 minutes, and it's almost whiteout conditions in that very restricted area. And those are dangerous because you could be in very, very manageable conditions. Say you're just driving up I-65 through Boone County and you're heading up toward Lafayette, and then all of a sudden, bang. And for the next 5 miles, you can't see your hand in front of your face because the snow is so heavy and the winds are whipping around, and it's so heavy, it's sticking to the ground, and temperatures are cooling quickly. And that's where you get major, major impacts because of those quickly changing driving conditions. Okay. So those are kind of the things. Now, all of this can be preempted with a winter storm watch that still exists. And oftentimes we see that issued, preceding a winter system. And then that gives the Weather Service some time to, one, warn you, the public. And so us as media partners are able to convey that message and say, hey, look, this is the deal. You often will get a winter storm watch issued maybe 2, 3, and in some cases, if you have very good model agreement, 4 days in advance. Excuse me. That also gives the Weather Service some time to kind of fine-tune timing and impacts and whether that needs to be turned into a winter storm warning or a winter weather advisory. Sometimes they'll split the difference depending on, the impacts in the warning area that the Weather Service is in charge of taking care of. Okay? So again, I urge you, if you're interested in kind of winter weather preparedness and safety protocols, make sure you're going to the Weather Service's website. Again, weather.gov/IND. And it really has some good resources that you can look. I didn't want to hit up on one because I think one of the scariest things for us in terms of, and probably the most impactful, is travel and travel safety. It doesn't take much to get you stranded. Now, we do live in the era of cell phones, thank goodness, where, if you do get some random road closures, that you have, GPS at your fingertips nowadays. And so you can easily get out of that situation and try to work your way around it. If you're driving in very rural areas and say a county road is drifted over and you can't make your way through. But I think it's still important that you make sure kind of have a preparedness kit and know what to do if you do get yourself in trouble. Obviously, if you get some winter storm products, whether they be warnings or advisories out, that if you can, I know not everybody can, but if you can, maybe avoiding travel. They close schools for a reason. I know not most people don't get their work closed. Although, who knows, with the age of COVID and a lot of people are able to work home, that maybe that kind of thinking is going to be a little more relaxed in letting people be able to work from home when you do get into severe winter weather situations around our area. But make sure if you are needing to travel, if you have to and it's bad weather, just make sure you let someone know that you're going to be out and they have your number. All right. Make sure you have plenty of space between vehicles. I know this sounds stuff that's just monotonous and we mention it, but I see it time and time again, driving the interstates into work. One of the most stressful drives I think I've had in my 40 years of life on this earth. And I've never lived in a warm weather climate. So every winter I've had to deal with snow. One of the more stressful drives I've ever had was the most recent major winter storm we had last February here in Indianapolis. Picked up over a foot in some spots. Roads hadn't been touched, and for good reason. We talked a little bit about that in the podcast. If you want to check that out, back in last February, Steve and myself were talking about it. But the roads weren't touched, and a big reason why was because of the heavy rate of snow. It was like fighting a losing battle. Started during the late evening drive and continued all through the evening and early overnight before it finally kind of moved out. But I had about a 20-mile drive from downtown Indianapolis to my house, and it's mainly all interstate. And I was on the interstate the entire time, and it was extremely stressful. But even then, I was probably driving about what usually would take me a 20-minute drive home, 20 to 30-minute drive home, almost took me over an hour. Because I was going extremely slow. I was just trying to stay within the grooves that had been made. But I still had people that were flying by. And hey, look, if you can handle that, that's fine. But that's where I think you can get yourself into trouble. I saw a lot of stranded cars on that drive back home. And we see that a lot. People getting stranded. They get stuck. They slide around. They're going too fast. They can't stop themselves. They end up kind of getting in the median, or they're getting stuck in a snowbank and that kind of stuff. So again, take your time. It's a lot better for you to show up later than not show up at all. Making sure not to slam on the brakes. And I think that just goes to speed. If you're traveling the right speed for the conditions, there shouldn't be a need to slam on the brakes, right? I think also another important thing is make sure if you are stuck in your car, if you get stranded, make sure you stay in your car. Okay, it's dry. It gives you shelter from the cold and the wind, and get those hazard lights on. It's also going to provide you protection if you are on, say, a busy road, and you end up sliding off the highway. That if other cars are sliding off the highway, you do not want to be kind of a sitting duck there outside of your car. Your vehicle is going to at least provide you some protection in there. So it's good to just stay in there, keep your seatbelt on, and that kind of stuff. It's also important, I think, to have your winter weather preparedness kit. Again, the Red Cross has a long list of things that you should have included in that. Backup batteries. I love to have, I don't even know what the right word is, but basically a portable charger for your cell phone that's already juiced up. So if your phone is near dying and for whatever reason you can't charge it through your car, that you have that backup there, that you can keep at least some battery life going on with your phone, so you can make contacts in an emergency. Water, blankets. You want to make sure you're keeping warm. Those are all important things that you need to have with you. Make sure you got snacks. If it's going to be an extended period of time, you want to be able to make sure that you're getting fluids and you're getting some food to kind of keep things going, because, not saying that we are due for a blizzard like of 1978, but I think back to that. And I know technology is much different now, but all the news articles you can Google online from any of the area newspapers around here, just how many people were stranded. And it went on for days, and so, you never want that to happen, but it's always good to be prepared. And hopefully you'll never have to use it, but just a little kit in your back seat or in the back of your trunk. Doesn't have to be big. Could just be a few things that are going to get you by if you end up getting stranded in winter weather, which we all know we get our fair share of. And hopefully, like I said, you'll never have to use it, but something that you should keep in mind as we prepare for the weather season. So, and again, I think that goes to not just winter weather, but any severe weather in general. It's good to have that preparedness kit, that disaster preparedness kit, making sure that you've got, what the Red Cross says, a 3-day supply of food, non-perishable food, that's ready to go in case you lose power. I think back to my time at Ball State, my senior year, pretty epic ice storm that we had in Muncie. And it would have been in 2005. Right before we went back for the spring semester, essentially, and knocked power out for a week, at least in my house. I know some areas were a little bit longer. And so luckily there were some restaurants that were getting back online a little more quickly, and so we were able to go out and eat. But at least for a few days, I went up to my mom's and stayed, and she had a lot more food than I did. But non-perishable stuff got us by for a couple of days because we just had no power, none. We couldn't have heat, didn't have the power to the fridge, couldn't use the microwave, didn't have the stove. Just something to keep in mind, because that is something that can happen, that we can lose power for an extended period of time. Look at the disaster that happened in Texas last year. And I know there was a lot that went into that, but, dealing with ice and cold down there, and they were without power for weeks, and a lot of people suffered because of that. So good thing to keep in mind. Again, it is Winter Weather Preparedness Week, and if you want more information, just go online to weather.gov/IND. And very top of the page, it has a highlight for Winter Weather Preparedness 2021. It'll have all the information that you need to know about getting yourself prepared for this winter weather season. Big question is, are we going to start seeing any winter weather? It's been very spring-like here for the last few days. We'll have that second week of November forecast that's coming up next here on Weather Weekly. All right, here's a look at your forecast for the second week of November, the week of November 8th, and unusually mild temperatures here over the extended period. Kick the work week off with numbers into the 60s and near 70 in some spots, and that trend looks to continue really through much of the week. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, I think what we'll have to watch for is Thursday, when we'll have a more potent system coming in here, a pretty potent cold front. Now, we're going to be on the warm side of that, so that is going to be an all-rain event for us, as it appears. Any snow is going to be well to our north and northwest into Minnesota and the Dakotas. So we're going to be on the warm sector of this, but we could get some heavier rain to the tune of maybe a quarter to half an inch of rainfall. And it also looks like it could get a bit windy, as well as we're going to have a pretty big transition from mild temperatures and highs in the 60s to barely making it out of the 40s by Friday. And so that cooler air will dive down as we head into Friday. I've got a high of 50, but dry on Friday. The weekend even looks cooler, as we'll have some of that chillier air kind of settling in. And I have highs in the low 40s both Saturday and Sunday. Do have a weak disturbance that's going to be coming through, looks like Saturday night into Sunday. And I think the timing is such that, and I know this is still several days away, but the timing is such that it could be cold enough during the overnight hours. We did below freezing, that some of that precip could be falling in the form of a rain-snow mix. Does not look substantial, but it could be our first snowflakes flying around here for this chilly season. So something to kind of look ahead toward. Again, nothing too significant. I don't think it would cause you any problems if you're going to be out and about on Sunday. And I think we'll probably see a pretty quick transition back over to all rain, a chilly rain potentially on Sunday once we get the sun up and we start to warm things up a little bit. Again, highs back in the 40s. But early next week looks like we're going to be on the chilly end of things as well, with temperatures still kind of maintaining in the 40s here for Monday and Tuesday early next week. As we look to the 6 to 10 day outlook, pretty good shot for below average temperatures and also below average precipitation, 8 to 14 day, which will take us to the middle of the month, below average temperatures and near normal precipitation there. So we'll go ahead and mention I know we're not going to dive too deep into the winter weather outlook. We're going to do that when Mike joins us here. But I do think it's kind of worthy to point out, we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week, but the Weather Service, the Climate Prediction Center, I should say, has issued their 3-month outlook, which would be November, December, and January. And it goes for above average temperatures, but also above average precipitation. So that takes us well into the winter months, 2/3 of the winter months there. And that kind of follows a pattern of La Nina, where you do get some above average precipitation. Now, the $1 million question is, you have above average temperatures, but is that enough to keep the precip from being snow? Above average doesn't necessarily always mean that we're going to keep things in the liquid variety. So it'll be interesting to watch that. But that is a typical La Nina pattern there. Above average temperatures and above average precip around the Great Lakes, the Midwest, and New England states. So we'll keep you updated on that. And, of course, looking forward to talking to Mike Ryan with the National Weather Service now that he officially has put out his forecast for the winter season. And we're hoping to get a detailed breakdown from him here in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. We'll keep you updated on social media and on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram as well, which we'd love to hear your feedback anytime about the podcast. If you got any good ideas for us, good interviews, love to hear it. You can email me anytime at marcus.bailey@wishtv.com, or again, you can hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Marcus Bailey Weather on Facebook, and at Marcus Bailey on Twitter and Instagram. Appreciate your time here for episode number 39, and we hope to see you here next week. Next week, we are going to talk about that November 17th outbreak. It'll be the anniversary of that. And so we will look ahead to that and kind of just dissect how that day played out, not just here in Indiana, but across much of the Midwest. Very impactful day across much of the Midwest for a late season severe weather outbreak. So hopefully you can join us then. While you're here, make sure to check out all the other great podcasts, part of the All Indiana Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next week.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.